Hello out there, everyone. Today I'm going to take a quick look at two Charles Bronson films from the mid-70s that I've only just recently watched, and I can attest to the fact that both are excellent. Starting with Mr. Majestic, a 1974 release, a story written by Elmore Leonard, actually, who of course has written a lot of very interesting stories, pulp and the like, that have been turned into films. But in any case, Mr. Majestic is basically about a farmer in the Central Valley of California who apparently has run afoul with some locals who don't like the fact that he's hiring, as they say, Latins on his field crew. And so he gets sort of badgered to ostensibly accept, people who he didn't hire to pick the fruit, pick the watermelon. And many of them are just, in bad shape, winos, whatever. And so that sort of starts off the conflict. And then it ends up intersecting with another individual who was the baddie and godfather. And he's a hitman. And basically these two characters, the Mr. Majestic character and the hitman character, end up sort of intertwined, and that becomes the balance of the narrative. It's really quite good. It's an interesting tale that is still germane today in terms of the sort of political dimensions of the Central Valley of farm workers, the campesinos, and I think it's just an interesting tale that obviously was written with some craft. Charles Bronson is great in it, and I think what really struck me about this film is honestly the chase sequence toward the end in Mr. Bronson's F-100 pickup is pretty remarkable. I mean, it's all obviously real stunts, no CGI here, and I can't believe what they do to that truck. I mean, it's pretty impressive, the sort of stunt work that they pulled off in this film. And it ends on a rather, climactic sort of in-house cat and mouse shootout scene that's been aped many times since. And so I suspect that many films owe this movie a debt. I definitely recommend it. It's not perfect. I think the soundtrack is a little dated. The score, I think, is a little monotonous, but Charles Bronson is great, and I think it's an interesting story and one that is pretty damn entertaining. So the next film I'm going to take a look at is Charles Bronson's Hard Times. Now, of course, this is a 4-disc pack that includes these 3 other films that I have not seen yet. But I had seen Hard Times previously. It's been many years. And I've sat down and watched it again and realized that, of course, this film was directed by Walter Hill, who is a fantastic director who's done many good films, including 48 Hours, Geronimo. He's one of the Streets of Fire. He's just one of the warriors, one of those great, journeyman directors who's done a lot of movies that have been damn entertaining and probably has never really gotten his due as a director. Southern Comfort is another one I really enjoyed with Powers Booth, I believe. But in any case, Hard Times is set in the New Orleans area, and I believe it's during the Depression, and Charles Bronson basically plays a street fighter who fights for money and ends up sort of falling into the orbit of the goodness gracious, James Coburn, his character, who's sort of like a hustler and ends up basically buddying up with the Bronson character, and they start engaging in fights. And it's really an interesting story, and one that, Bronson again plays the stoic, and I will say too, I mean, he's in his early 50s in this film, and he is ripped. I mean, he looks good. He's impressive. Obviously his face is worn from sun damage and whatnot, but I mean, he legitimately, he plays a serious convincing street fighter. And I have no doubt that in real life he was probably a pretty tough dude as well. But I digress. I'll just say that Hard Times is a excellent story filled with some really interesting on location film camera work rather in New Orleans. And I think it's also kind of interesting as well in that there really aren't any bad guys per se. Everyone seems to be operating on a code and doing what they do best. I think of all people, James Coburn is the one who I found rather the most obnoxious, and arguably one that didn't really deserve the bailout that he got at the end of the film. But I think the Bronson character, he was a very interesting, almost seraphic individual, at least with respect to the James Coburn character and how much trouble he was in. So I highly recommend it. I think this is definitely one of Bronson's best films, if not his very best. It's a very entertaining watch, and I think that films like Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can, along with many other sort of street fight type movies, owe this film a big debt. I think that Walter Hill did this one very well, and I think it holds up quite well here many years later, and is, like I said, arguably Bronson's best film. So on that note, I'll just say as well that this Blu-ray release is quite good, at least the Hard Times. It looks and sounds great. The DVD that I showed you earlier for Mr. Majestic also looks pretty good. It's an MGM release, and while it's not a Blu-ray, it's perfectly fine, to be honest. I don't have any complaints. So I definitely recommend checking out both films. And, if for whatever reason Charles Bronson's never been your bag, I would start with Hard Times, and perhaps you'll change your tune after watching that one. And Mr. Majestic is, I think, a pretty damn entertaining film as well. So on that note, take care out there, everyone. Stay safe, be kind, and by all means, keep watching good cinema.